Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Valerie Wolfe. I'm the Executive Director of the Hamilton Clinic, which is responsible for the South Central region of Ontario, for OHCOW, the Occupational Health Clinics for Ontario Workers. And I'm here today as part of our migrant farm worker team, who have been working for many years trying to assist migrant farm workers and their employers and their workplaces with respect to occupational health and safety, and particularly the prevention of injury and illness. And a lot of that work at times involves workers' comp claims or injuries, and the question of whether workers' compensation applies and how that system supports migrant farm workers and their employers, and how we can assist further. So that's the reason we brought us together today, is to talk about an introduction to WSIB, and particularly related to international agricultural workers, and even also particularly related to COVID-19, which is an occupational illness that has impacted on a lot of workers in Ontario, including these international agricultural workers. So thanks so much for joining us today. And I'm happy right now to introduce our first speaker, Michelle Tu, who is the Occupational Health Nurse in the Hamilton Clinic and has been leading the Migrant Farm Worker Program to a large extent for many years. So Michelle, over to you.
Thanks, Val. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session addressing WSIB and migrant workers, or international agricultural workers, as they're referred to by some folks. So WSIB, Workplace Safety Insurance Board, is Ontario's workers' compensation system. And WSIB is a very important partner in providing income replacement when a worker is injured, becomes ill, or, as is the case of the past year or so, may have to quarantine due to an exposure of COVID-19 at the workplace, or otherwise related to work. So all international agricultural workers are covered by WSIB, even if they are undocumented. And these workers have extended coverage that you and I don't have, in that they are covered 24/7 while living in an employer-provided housing. For example, if a worker breaks his leg playing soccer where the worker lives, then that should be a WSIB claim. It's an eligible WSIB claim. WSIB can be a complicated system to navigate, and it's that way for many permanent residents as well, not just migrant farm workers. And WSIB decisions can have both a positive and a negative impact on workers and their families. Negative decisions may result in controversy, hardship, stress, and a sense of injustice, which may have a lot of emotion attached to it. And I'm sure that WSIB gets these reactions from workers and their advocates quite often. In our discussions today and every day, we want to thank everyone for respecting each other's work and opinions. Today, we're very fortunate to have Kendra, who is manager of stakeholder engagement with WSIB, to review WSIB services and how workers can access these services. Having worked for WSIB for the past 16 years, Kendra began her career as a consolidated adjudicator, then moved into the role of management for the past 10 years. Working across the spectrum of case management with her teams, she's developed a strong foundation in the guiding legislation, policy, and practices of WSIB. And Kendra has worked with our teams, or her teams, in Guelph over the past years, and has a strong understanding of agricultural claims and the foreign agricultural worker policy. Over the past year, Kendra has been providing education to the agricultural industry related to COVID-19 and WSIB. Kendra holds a Bachelor of Commerce in Public Management and a Master's of Arts in Public Policy and Administration, both from the University of Guelph. So welcome, Kendra.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share some information with you today about the WSIB and just give a general overview of what we're here and what we do. So I'm here today, and I thank OHCOW for arranging this session to provide an introduction to the WSIB, foreign agricultural workers, and COVID-19. Today's presentation is going to provide you with an overview of WSIB, rights and responsibilities, foreign agricultural worker coverage, reporting a workplace injury or illness, wage reimbursement, recovery, and return to work. Throughout the presentation, I will be focusing on the information that is specific to foreign agricultural workers when they are injured or become ill at work. I will also provide information related to COVID-19 should an individual become ill as a result of a workplace exposure. To start with, let's do an overview of the WSIB. So what do we do here? Our goal is to eliminate workplace injuries, illness, and fatalities. Our mandate is to promote health and safety in the workplace, facilitate return to work, recovery, and work transition of people who experience a workplace injury or illness, and provide compensation and other benefits when people cannot return to work safely. Our board of directors, we have our chair, Elizabeth Whitmer, whose tenure with us ends at the end of this year. We have an acting president, Tom Bell. He is our president and CEO. He was appointed on February 1st of this year. And we have 9 board members. Their responsibility is for the governance, setting strategic priorities, overseeing the achievement of objectives, and management's overall performance. But where exactly do we fit in? The WSIB is an agency of the Ontario government. Under the responsibilities of the Ministry of Labour, Training and Skills Development, we operate at arm's length from the ministry. We are responsible for implementing and enforcing the Workplace Safety and Insurance Act of 1997. And the government passes our legislation, but we are responsible for our own policies and programs. A bit of our history. We were founded over 100 years ago in 1914. Workmen's Compensation Act, passed in 1915, was based on the 5 Meredith principles, which we still follow today. We have a no-fault compensation system. People injured are paid benefits regardless of how the injury occurred. There is no right to sue. There is no argument over responsibility or liability for an injury. Secondly, we have the security of benefits. A fund is established to guarantee funds exist to pay benefits. It's a collective liability. Employers share liability for workplace injury insurance and the total cost of the compensation system. All employers contribute to a common fund. Independent administration. Organizations who administer compensation insurance are separate from the government. And it's an exclusive jurisdiction. Compensation boards have exclusive and final authority over all compensation claims and a responsibility to provide workers' compensation insurance. So our act. It's titled the Workplace Safety and Insurance Act, and the particular act that we use every day right now is the one of 1997. The WSIA makes sure employees receive benefits for workplace injuries or illnesses if they cannot work. In turn, businesses receive no-fault workplace insurance to promote them from costly court settlements. The WSIA makes sure employees can return to work whenever possible after a workplace injury or illness. But who exactly are our customers? We provide collective liability insurance coverage and efficient account and claims management services so employers can focus on running their business. Since our founding, we have become one of the largest insurance organizations in North America. Approximately 5 million employees and 300,000 businesses in the province are covered by us. That's about 70% of Ontario's workforce. What are our claims and benefits? Every year, we receive approximately 250,000 claims. We pay over $2.5 billion in benefits. We cover full medical care for people who are injured or made ill at work and a replacement of 85% of their wages as long as necessary until they are able to return to work. In the event of a fatality, the surviving spouse receives financial support, support to re-enter the workforce if necessary, and support to provide for post-secondary education of dependent children. But what are the rights and responsibilities of workers and employers? An employee's rights and responsibilities, all employees in Ontario workplaces have the right to know about potential danger, participate in making their workplace safe, and refuse unsafe work. Employees have the responsibility to work safely, report unsafe work conditions, and wear the right safety equipment for the job. In turn, employers have responsibilities. All businesses in Ontario are responsible for taking all precautions to provide a safe and healthy workplace, providing equipment, material, and protective devices as required by law, and making sure they're maintained in good condition, informing employees of any potential hazards and how to handle them, providing information instructions, and competent supervision to protect their workers' health and safety. Before I continue, I just wanted to add, I do have my colleague, Debbie Jeffrey, who is also a stakeholder relations manager here with me. She's going to be monitoring the chat throughout, and if there's any questions that she can answer in there, she will go ahead and do so. So if you have questions as we go along, she definitely can help you out. Foreign agricultural workers. So our foreign agricultural worker policy speaks specifically to workers participating in the Commonwealth, Caribbean, Mexican seasonal agricultural worker program. So if you look up that policy, that it's going to say that it specifically applies to that. I just wanted to point that out. So at the top, the first three boxes, speak to our general coverage information. We want to make sure that all people are treated fairly and kept safe on the job. When foreign agricultural workers are injured or made ill on the job in Ontario, they are eligible for WSIB benefits and services like any Ontarian covered by the WSIB. The coverage begins the day that the person arrives at the agreed upon point of departure in their home country and continues until they return to their home country. In addition to coverage while in the course of employment, workers are also covered during periods of leisure, meals, and while sleeping in employer-provided quarters. Coverage while in Ontario, so coming from the airport in Ontario to the employer's business, and using a bus or car with the employer's authorization when traveling to and from the employer's business on a direct, uninterrupted route, and taking time off or during meal times while on your employer's properties, and sleeping in the accommodation provided by the employer. Coverage generally does not apply when taking part in recreational activities away from the employer's location or visiting with family and friends. The bottom three boxes speak to the coverage specific to COVID-19. So you will note that the coverage remains the same. One thing specific is the COVID-19 isolation. So current travel recommendations require an isolation period upon entering Canada. During this time, the foreign agricultural workers are covered by the WSIB should they suffer illness or injury. What this means is after entering the country, if they test positive for COVID-19, a Form 7 should be filed for review for entitlement. It is the responsibility of the WSIB to determine if the illness is considered a work-related and if there is entitlement to benefits. We also know that some workers may be required to isolate due to exposure. WSIB benefits are payable only when there is a workplace illness or injury. Because of this, if a worker becomes ill with COVID-19 subsequently causing an entire bunkhouse to isolate, coverage can only be considered for those who have diagnosis/positive test for symptoms or symptoms of COVID-19. Reporting a workplace injury or illness. In this section, I'm going to speak specifically to reporting an injury from the lens of an injured or ill person. In case of injury or illness at work, get medical help. The employer is responsible for providing first aid. An injured or ill person should go to the doctor or hospital if they need treatment. The employer must pay for transportation. Documentation. The injured or ill person should tell their employer about their injury or illness. They will investigate and keep a record of what happened. Report to the WSIB. Employers must tell us within 3 days if an injury or illness happens. Injured or ill people can report by submitting a worker's report of injury, which is commonly referred to as a Form 6. And then we work together. We will work with the injured or ill person and their employer to help them recover and return to work safely at the right time. The Workplace Safety and Insurance Act outlines the following reporting obligations. If someone needed treatment from a health professional or was absent from work or earns less than regular pay, i.e. working fewer hours or being paid less per hour, requires modified duties for greater than 7 days, even if the employee doesn't need treatment from a health professional. This means any change in their job duty while recovering from an injury or illness for more than 7 calendar days at regular pay. In this case, it must be reported on the 8th day of modified work. If an individual is not sure whether the injury or illness is work-related, they should still report it to us. We will make the decision whether the injury is work-related or not. As I previously mentioned, people can report a workplace injury on the worker's report of injury, which is the Form 6. We have several ways that people can report a workplace injury or illness. You can report online. You can call our 1-800 number and speak to a customer service representative. Our customer service representatives have immediate access to translation services. When a person with injury or illness contacts us, we are able to communicate with them in their preferred language. They also have the ability to complete a worker's report of injury, also known as a Form 6. This form is available on our website in English, French, and Spanish. Now let's look at the lens from COVID-19 reporting obligations. When there's an exposure, if a person does not have a diagnosis or symptoms of COVID-19, they are not required to report the illness or have their employer file a Form 7. They should not file a claim. One way they can report the exposure to the WSIB is through our Program of Exposure Incident Reporting, or PEER. This is a voluntary program, and an incident number will be assigned. Should the individual fall ill after reporting an exposure, an exposure incident, we will be able to process their claim faster. COVID-19 testing. With COVID-19, oftentimes the only medical attention that an individual will receive is the COVID-19 test. If a person has had a COVID-19 test, the WSIB considers that they have received health care. In the case of a positive test and the person believes they contracted COVID-19 in the workplace, they should report the illness to their employer to report the illness to the WSIB. An employer is required to report the illness even if they feel the employee did not contract it at work. If the person tests negative for COVID-19, there is no requirement to report an illness to the WSIB. So when should we report? There are two main scenarios when a claim should be filed for COVID-19 with the WSIB. The first being when a person tells their employer that they have COVID-19 and they have a diagnosis / positive test or symptoms of COVID-19, and they believe that they contracted it in the workplace. The employer is also required to report the illness even if they feel the employee did not contract it at work. The second being when the person has received a COVID-19 positive test result and the employer has reason to believe that there has been a potential workplace exposure. Examples of this include, but are not limited to, other employees in the workplace have tested positive for COVID-19, or there was a known or suspected contact source for COVID-19 from whom the employee could have contracted it. If an employer or a worker is unsure about whether there is an obligation to report, we encourage them to report in the normal way. It is the WSIB's responsibility to determine the work-relatedness of the claim. We adjudicate COVID-19 claims on a case-by-case basis, taking into consideration facts and circumstances to determine if they are work-related and if the person is eligible for WSIB benefits. So wage replacement. Loss of earnings benefits are calculated at 85% of the take-home pay up to an annual maximum. If an injured or ill person misses time from work because of a work-related injury, and we allow the claim, they may be entitled to loss of earnings benefits. As mentioned, they would be calculated at 85% of their take-home. It's paid out biweekly and normally starts the day after an injury and/or illness, and when the injured or ill person begins to miss time from work. It will continue until the work-related injury or illness no longer affects the person's ability to return to pre-injury work, or the injured or ill person is no longer losing pay, or the day the injured or ill person reaches age 65 years old. If they were less than 63 years old at the date of their injury or illness, or 2 years after the date of injury or illness, if the injured or ill person was 63 years old at the time of their injury or illness. Some employers will continue to pay their employees wages when they are off from work. If this time away from work is allowed under the claim, we would consider these continued wages as an advance by the employer, and we would reimburse the employer for these wages. Recovery, return to work, and services post-repatriation. We're here to make sure people receive the right care at the right time so they have the fullest recovery possible. We operate 6 programs to aid in people's recovery. There are drug benefits, which provide 100% coverage for medication prescribed by physicians for work-related injury or illness. We have programs of care. It's an evidence-based treatment plan for most common musculoskeletal injuries and specific illnesses. Non-surgical fracture episodes of care provides comprehensive rehabilitation treatment for non-surgical fractures. We have our serious injury program, which provides specialized treatment, equipment, and services to help maximize function, recovery, and quality of life. We have specialty programs, which provide fast access to expert specialists for more complex injuries and illnesses. And we also have our community mental health program, which provides access to psychological assessment and evidence-based outcome-focused treatment. Return to work. We're here to help injured and ill people return to work safely at the right time. We'll provide individuals with quality services and build a customized return to work plan that is right for them. Case managers work closely with injured or ill people and their employers to support return to work, looking at the person's abilities and ensuring that any modified work is suitable. Return to work specialists may be engaged to determine what is needed to get the best outcomes, which may include an on-site visit. Services post-repatriation. Depending on the program that the individual is participating in, there may be a point in which they return to their home country. We do not make the decision on when an injured or ill foreign agricultural worker leaves the province. This is federal jurisdiction. If a foreign agricultural worker is injured or made ill at work, we will stay in contact with the person throughout their recovery and return to work, whether they are in Ontario or their home country, to make sure that they are receiving the care and support they need. Pay for their travel to and from medical appointments. If a person is receiving care in their home country, we will arrange for prepayment of travel expenses. Find healthcare for people receiving treatment in Ontario or their home country and pay providers directly. Our goal is to get the best recovery and return to work outcomes for the people we're here to help. And with that, I'd like to open it up for discussion.
Thanks a lot, Kendra.
No problem.
Debbie's been doing a good job answering, but I think it's worth going over some of the questions that have been in the chat, just in case there's people on the call on their phone who wouldn't necessarily see the chat. So the first question was from Dorothy, asking, in assessing claims from illness during isolation, does the WSIB accept that the virus is in the air and therefore others in the isolation building can share the virus with isolating workers? So if you want to know what Debbie answered,
I would agree with what that.
Debbie answered yes. This wasn't a test to see if you answered differently. Yes, this factor would be taken into consideration when reviewing entitlement for a COVID-19 claim. I don't know if you have any more information on that transmission risks and how they're assessed.
So we basically look at all of the circumstances around the contact points and contact where they could contract it, and we would look at the facts of the case. So
yeah, any work-related exposures, and so isolation, when they arrive or because of symptoms that they get while they're working in it and they're put in isolation, but they end up getting COVID, all of that would be considered in determining entitlement for a COVID-19 claim.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. That's helpful. And I think Oratai asked, and you answered, but will the WSIB cover the wages for those migrant workers who are tested positive for COVID-19 but show no symptoms because they still need to be self-isolated? You answered yes again, Debbie. If they have a positive COVID-19 test, they will be covered for the period that they need to self-isolate, regardless of whether they have symptoms. I don't know if there's anything else related to that.
No, that's consistent with exactly the practices that have been going on with any worker in Ontario. If there's a workplace exposure that has caused a COVID-19 positive, we would absolutely, even if they're asymptomatic, there's that COVID-19 positive test, which renders them with the virus. Therefore, there is a workplace illness.
Okay, here's another question. What if they are negative, but were isolated with someone who tested positive?
So during the period of where they're isolating due to a negative test, we're unable to pay a benefit because there is no workplace illness at that point. Should they later test positive, we would absolutely expect the employer to submit that Form 7 for adjudication, noting the fact that there was a workplace exposure that rendered that person COVID positive.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
And how many claims have been made by these workers, I guess, in general and accepted? Do you have any of those stats and number of deaths, I guess, so far on record from a WSIB perspective?
Sorry, we do have, and you know what, I forgot to pull up our website. We do have that on our website. So I'm quickly pulling it up.
You could put the link to the numbers as well and show your screen if you want to show people what it looks like.
Got it right here. I
Yep.
think are you seeing my website?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
okay.
are. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on our website, we have frequently asked questions and then novel COVID-19 updates. And you can see within here our COVID-19 claim statistics. So right now, the total number of claims that have been allowed are 24,975. That's total that have been submitted. And that includes 46 fatalities. That's as of March 31st. This will be updated quarterly, is my understanding.
This, to clarify, is all of Ontario?
Correct. All of Ontario.
Not agriculture workers. Okay.
Correct. And then when we drill down further down, you can see by industry sector, agriculture, it does not separate out migrant workers, but the allowed for agriculture is 2,408. Not allowed is 113, and pending currently is 7. These are updated every Monday about midday based on Friday's data. What I would say is when you're looking at not allowed, they may include where somebody has tested negative. So there's been, there's no illness in those cases.
Right.
Or their workplace, or the exposure did not occur in the workplace.
Right.
But yeah, so you can see our total, and it breaks down by industry. As long as they're greater than 5, it'll break down, but it'll show you your agriculture, and that gets updated weekly.
And does the site show the deaths that have been recognized?
Not specific to agriculture, but it does show the total number for 40, and it's been 46 province-wide.
Okay, thank you. Michelle has a question. If a worker gets symptoms post-vaccination and cannot attend work, should a WSIB claim be initiated?
There is, in our frequently asked questions, information around vaccines. So in order for a claim to be established, it has to be compulsory, and there has to be a adverse what's
reaction?
it called, Debbie? Not an adverse reaction, but it's like a significant, you know what I'm talking about, right?
A significant adverse reaction.
Thank
So
you.
not an expected reaction that is noted, like, so when you go and get your shot and they tell you your arm's going to be sore, you may have a slight fever for a few days, you know, it might feel general malaise, you know, this kind of thing. Those are expected reactions to the vaccine. But if it's something beyond that, that would require medical attention, you know, or like significant, like something that is not expected. And they'll say in public health, like, if you experience these symptoms, please contact public health. Those are like, you know, like a severe anaphylactic reaction, something like that, then yes, if the vaccine was mandatory and if you had a significant adverse reaction, then there could be a claim established.
And in our frequently asked questions, it also defines what mandatory would be considered. So I'm gonna include the link for the frequently asked questions as well.
Yeah, that's great, thanks. Yeah, so I guess that's interesting, I guess, if you would consider a fever to be disablement for a worker that's expected to work in a, you know, heavy work in a greenhouse or something like that, that would seem to me to be the gap in the policy. Is it may be the predicted result, but it still may be a disablement with respect to work.
And that's consistent with our policy for vaccination in general. be a
Okay.
consistent approach. So there's been no change or deviation from our policy for COVID-19.
There's a question here, not specifically COVID related, but what if a doctor, by request of the farmer, assigns modified labor that can't be done by the worker? Because, for instance, someone, I don't know if you can read it, a
Yeah.
worker with a wound that was sent to work in sandals in a dusty place. And
Yeah, so what I would recommend in those cases, I mean, that's case specific and it would
Yeah.
definitely need to go to the case manager for adjudication. In that case, I would say it would be up to the case manager to review suitability of work if the offer has been made. And of course, if there's any follow-up questions, those would be best addressed by the case management team.
Great. Thanks a lot, Kendra. I think we'll move on now to talk about OHCOW's role in our clinical role, and also in interacting and helping with the navigation for WSIB, as well as the healthcare in general and other aspects of our program. But Kendra, you're able to stay till the end, so there'll be the opportunity for a bit more discussion before 3 o'clock. We are hoping to finish by 3, but if discussion continues, then some of us may be able to stay a little bit longer. But we want to then, I guess, circle back again to Michelle to offer. Thanks very much, Kendra, and Debbie. Thanks for you're taking your time for the presentation and being here to answer our questions. So